The information shared on the Allo podcast is not intended as medical advice. Your medical care decisions should be made in consultation with your physician who is familiar with your specific case.
Hi, and welcome to the Allo podcast from the Allo Hope Foundation. I'm Molly Sherwood.
And I'm Bethany Weathersby.
And I am ready to roll. I have chocolate energy. I took a break before this to eat some chocolate because in our family, our boys will do a bonfire at the end of the night, and then sometimes we'll give them a little piece of chocolate. And then one day, a couple of them just started running around the yard, and Connor was like, "Do you have chocolate energy?" And they were like, "Yes, I have chocolate energy." And so it's just their favorite is getting chocolate energy. So I was like, I'm going to give myself some chocolate energy before we dive into this episode. So
I wish I had
I'm buzzing.
All right, go for it. Lead the way.
All right. So, I'll lead the way. Okay, so I wrote today's script. We kind of split up, we split the season up. We each write about half of the scripts. And then in the script, I put one little line for you, Bethany, to launch us with something funny, which is, I already did that. So we're kind of good now. But anyway, like a funny, tiny... Sorry. My chocolate energy is really helping me out right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Like a funny, tiny thing. I wanted you to share a funny, tiny thing that your kids did the night before that was wonderful, hilarious life lesson, but you don't do anything halfway, do you?
Right. No, I don't. No. So I thought that it would be a fantastic idea to quickly interview my children before they went to school this morning and ask them to tell me one tiny but important thing that I've taught them or said to them that completely changed their life. And I don't know why I was so confident about this, but I certainly learned my lesson. I was feeling really good about myself and, my role as their giver of all wisdom. And so I was ready to hear the profound thoughts. So my kindergartner said, the most important tiny thing I've ever said to him was, "I like to move it, move it." And then he shook his little behind at me. Okay. So then I moved on to my middle schooler, and he said the thing that changed his life over and over again was when I said, "We're having another baby." Again and again and again, which is true. And I'm like, your life did change so many times. That's true. And then my second grader weighed in, and she told me that the one tiny thing I've said to her in the past that changed her life was, "I farted." And that's how she knew that she had to run in order to survive the fart cloud. So
I can attest. You know what? I am with Nora on that. I can attest. I have lived that experience with you.
You have. It was a really bad night of hotel fart. I'm sorry. This is not
hotel room.
Hotel farts
are just so it's like a little it's like a fart. Like a tomb for farts.
It's true. There's no airflow.
There's no
circulating
flow. Air.
None.
Oh, it's terrible.
No.
Okay.
We couldn't open a window, and it was not really good to open the door to release the fart into the hotel hallway. But anyway, wow. All right. Well, that was the profound wisdom that we've now passed on to our listeners.
Wow. Amazing, profound wisdom. A perfect segue. But it's not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, anyway. Perfect segue, but it's not.
Oh, gosh. Just run like you were running out of that hotel room. Run into today's topic.
Okay, I'm going to... Okay. All right, let's go to the topic, okay? Do you want to share how we came up with this topic?
Yes. Okay. So we're calling this episode One Tiny Thing, and I am really excited about it because we were able to incorporate a whole lot of feedback from patients, from allo-immunized moms, lots of great patient stories. The topic is super interesting and intriguing to me. We came up with this episode because in our work with allo-immunized moms, we do hear so many powerful instances of one tiny thing happening that completely changes the trajectory of someone's pregnancy or in some cases their entire life. So that one tiny thing does turn out to be one monumentally important thing. And we think that it's really important to share these patient experiences with our listeners because something that they hear today in this episode could be that one tiny thing that they needed to hear that changes everything for them.
Yeah, I agree. And especially, I think what's cool about this is some of these stories are the embodiment of a lot of the concepts and, you know, monitoring ideas that we always talk about. But here we are actually conveying how it really has an effect. So I'm really excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I know, Bethany, you'll have answers to each of these that I want to hear. And I have answers to one or two that I'll probably throw in there. So we asked women in our community 3 different question prompts about one tiny thing that happened or that someone said to you. And so the first question was for lost moms. And the question was, what is one tiny thing that could have saved your baby's life? So I think you should walk us through these and share about what women shared with us.
Sure. Okay. So let's start with our dear friend Rose. And she's a patient from Kenya. And she's now like one of our sisters, right, Molly? I love her so much. And you can hear her whole story in season 2 of the podcast. But Rose lost her first 2 babies, Alexis and Max, to untreated post-birth HDFN in Kenya. And then she had to come all the way to the U.S. during her 3rd pregnancy to access the care that she needed. And her son, Lucas, is now a healthy 1-year-old. He just had his first birthday, and he's beautiful, and we love him so much. I love it. So the one tiny thing that Rose said could have possibly saved Alexis and Max's life was access to adequate care and monitoring. Coming from a place where that was not available when I had my first 2 HDFN babies, I always feel like their lives could have been saved. And I agree, her babies just needed basic care, and it's just devastating.
It's a tragedy. And Rose now is working in Kenya, doing her best to offer what care and support she can give to women who have stories like her.
Okay, so I'm going to read Megan's story, and she told us the one tiny thing that she thought could have saved her baby's life. She says, I waited 10 days between Doppler scans because of appointment timing with my anatomy scan. Excuse me. By that time, baby had high drops. If I would have just gone back at day 7, we could have caught the anemia, and that is heartbreaking to think about. The reason why we push for the weekly MCA Doppler scans.
Yeah, things change so quickly. Yeah.
It's true.
Oh, Megan. Thank you for sharing that, Megan.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. And thank you, Rose. Okay, the next response is from a mom who has become a close friend to all of us at the foundation. And when my husband Josh was having a surgery for his cancer treatments a few months back in Atlanta, she came to the hospital and brought Josh some homemade bone broth. And it was so kind. It was just so meaningful to both of us. And that's just how incredible our community is. And also it shows the bond that mothers who have experienced this type of loss usually have. It's really amazing. So her name is Kate, and Kate lost her daughter Josie last year at 38 weeks gestation to undiagnosed HDFN. An extra ultrasound is all it could have taken. And if I had known babies don't run out of room as they get bigger, or that I was supposed to receive RhoGAM more than just at delivery, I would have known to advocate for the right care, and maybe things would look different.
Oh, Kate. You know, she's right, but how could she have been expected to know? I mean...
Right. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, this is hard. And Kate, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us so that we can get the word out that these are very crucial things that moms can be aware of. And we love you. We love you and Josie. Yeah. Another mom who lost her baby to HDFN wrote in from India, and she said what could have kept her baby alive was checking titers and paying attention to kick counts. So that's another really tough one where the monitoring wasn't as proactive as it needs to be, and with terrible consequences.
Oh, it reminds me of what we were just saying in our first episode of sort of top, whatever it was, 5, 10, 20 things, where one of them was just go in if your baby's not moving, if you feel like you need to be seen. And her story is a great example of how her mom instinct was telling her that her baby needed help. And so paying attention to that is so, so valuable. And I hope everybody listening feels empowered to do that.
Okay, so one more mom that we have is Carrie, and she is writing in from Scotland. I love Carrie so much. She reached out to me way back in 2018, before the Aloe Hope Foundation even existed. And she told me that she had lost her son to HDFN several years before that. And she was kind of looking for more information about this disease and wondering if she could possibly have another baby that survived. And so Carrie responded to this prompt and said that the one tiny thing that could have saved her baby's life was her doctors understanding the unpredictability of anti-Cal and responding when they needed to. And it's really hard to hear these stories about losses, knowing that for the most part, they were probably preventable. Even just the thought that one tiny change could have saved a life, but it didn't, that is truly devastating. And thinking through my own loss of my daughter Lucy, the one tiny thing that probably could have saved her is if my MFMs had listened to my concerns and taken them seriously, and then just provided the monitoring and care that I specifically asked for, which I know that that's an odd thing for a provider to listen to a patient and change what they think should be the protocol to something different. But, you know, I had a very high titer. I was very concerned about early onset fetal anemia, and I couldn't make them also feel the concern, at least enough to do monitoring and treatments that my baby needed to survive. So that's just very hard. And thank you to all of the women who wrote in. I really appreciate sharing these stories and also hearing them.
You know what I wanted to ask you? I wanted to ask you what you tell yourself and what you tell other mothers who struggle with the guilt of wishing they had done or someone had done something differently. What do you say?
Yeah, that's really hard, and it's something I've had to work through personally for years. But
Yeah.
I do think that hindsight is completely different from being in that actual situation, real time. You know, hindsight makes things visible to us that weren't visible at the time. And so, of course, we would have done whatever possible to save our babies at the time if we had known what needed to be done. But we didn't know in that moment. And so we did do our best in the moment with the information that we had. And I don't think that it's, even though it is very easy to slip into this, I think it's not healthy to take on the guilt personally for something that was out of our control, you know? And so just freeing yourself of that and understanding that I did the best I could in the moment.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't know if that's enough.
I think I'm so glad to hear your thoughts on that. I hope that that's comforting. I love that perspective of what I knew then is not the same as what I know now. And if you did have the knowledge and you did have the power, of course you would have. But it's a different situation. You have different knowledge and a different power at that time. Yeah.
Right. And I do want to add something to that. So another part of that is that as patients, we don't need to take on the guilt of something that our provider missed or the provider didn't do or care that we didn't receive. Because in the end, that wasn't our responsibility to start with. That was our provider's responsibility. That was the medical system's responsibility. And so if we aren't our own doctor and we're not professionally trained and this wasn't we're the mother, we're the patient. This is, we don't need to take on the guilt of something that they missed. So yeah, that's another big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have one more story to share very quickly. And this was another one that we were not sure which category it fit in, but I wanted to share it here because I feel like it brings some really good insight into this issue of losing a child. And she has, her first initial is L. She lives in the U.S. She has anti-D antibodies, and her titer was actually too low to titers, very, very low. She did everything in her power to ensure a safe pregnancy. She traveled 3 hours to an MFM. She educated herself, got the right lab work, all the things. And even though it wasn't technically necessary, because she had a low titer, her MFM did an MCA scan to check for fetal anemia at 16 weeks, and her baby looked wonderful. Her daughter was great. But shortly after that, around 18 weeks, she found out that her daughter had died, and she and her providers just do not know what happened. They have no idea what the reason was for that loss. And I want to thank this mother for sharing her daughter with us and sharing her story, and wanted to point out that a lot of times when a mother loses a baby during pregnancy, she doesn't know why. There's no clear answer. We don't know what happened, and there's a lot of uncertainty and not much information behind that. And that is, I think that can be extra traumatizing to always wonder what happened, what caused this, And so I wanted to share that because a lot of times we don't know the one tiny thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that from the Aloe Hope Foundation, it's just our job to support these women through their grief, whatever the cause, and honor their babies as they should be.
Yeah, I agree. And we are so privileged to do that, and even to have this forum to share about these children. So we feel very honored.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, I'm going to walk us through the next question that we asked, which was, what was the one tiny thing that you think ended up saving your baby's life in your allo-immunized pregnancy? Okay, so this is a mom in the U.S., and we're going to go by her first initial, E. And she says, I'm not sure whether it saved his life, but it definitely prevented a double exchange transfusion. She says, I have anti-D, and we were in the NICU treating high bilirubin. My son was improving, so before they were weaning him off the Billy lights, we were down to just a Billy blanket, and the doctor wanted to wait 6 hours before the next blood test. So you might think 6 hours, like, oh, that's okay, but Billy is quick. And so she says, we felt uncomfortable with the decision because the previous blood test showed that the Billy levels were rising and already back above the phototherapy threshold. We insisted that his blood be rechecked at 3 hours instead. So they did. And when his labs came back, the Billy had spiked and he was just under needing an exchange transfusion. So they just brought the lights back up. And together with the aggressive lights and IVIG for the baby, they were able to narrowly avoid the exchange transfusion. And she feels like if she had not pushed back on that, he would have ended up getting an exchange transfusion.
Wow. Can you imagine if they had waited 6 hours? Like what the levels would have been by then?
A difference of, of just 3 hours. Yeah.
I was just going to say also with this type of bilirubin, it's important to try to catch it early because then you can kind of get ahead of it. But it's really hard to treat it if you're coming in late in the game when you're already past that threshold and you're trying to bring those levels down once they're already at that at that
Yeah.
threshold.
I think that's a
Wow.
great story to show. Really, in those, especially in those first few days after birth, the Billy can change by the hour, really.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that they did IVIG and that in the end, that helped also prevent an exchange transfusion. So that's definitely helped my babies too.
Yeah, that's a great sort of educational testimonial there. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is from your friend Carrie again, who you just shared about in Scotland. After having lost her son with her very high Kel titers, she found you and another mom from the UK and other women in the support community who connected her with another doctor in preparation for her next pregnancy with her daughter. And she was able to have a living baby. Carrie writes that what kept her daughter alive was, she says, my understanding of HDFN and thus being able to advocate for my baby. And then you told me just this morning that she went on to be the first woman in her region to receive IVIG in her pregnancy. She had 22 IVIG infusions with extremely high Kel titers and ended up delivering a healthy baby girl at 36 weeks with no IUTs.
It's amazing. It's
Oh
incredible.
my gosh. And she also said the most important thing someone said to her, which I'm folding into here because it's along the similar vein, is anti-Kel antibodies are unpredictable and titer levels do not correlate with risk completely, and the situation can change very quickly. So awesome reminder. Happy to share that with our listeners. And I know we totally agree with
Yeah.
her. This next one is from Jill in her pregnancy with her son, Madden, who survived HDFN. And she also is a lost mom and is coming at her perspective with that experience in her heart too. So she says that the one thing that kept her son, Madden, alive was going with my gut. I always knew when Madden would not be feeling well because he wouldn't slow down like I was told that he would when he became anemic. He would do the opposite. He would move around like crazy. And she said, at 28 weeks, I knew this was the case. His hemoglobin was a 2 at the start of his IUT.
Wow.
And she says, I am so glad I became to know that about him because that saved him. And that is scary low. That is so low. You know what else I wanted to
Yeah.
say? I remember Rose had this same experience too with baby Lucas, that
Right.
he would start to be more active when he was actually getting more anemic. And
Yes.
some baby, I don't know. It's that could be an indicator too. I think moms learn their baby's personalities, honestly, in utero. And I think that should be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when there's anything that's noticeably different about your baby's activity, I think it's important to go in and just get checked. I know that I was afraid of this very thing when my babies were active. And so I would ask my MFM all the time. They're very active, you know, is it a big deal? You know, and you know, should I be worried? And so they did tell me that they aren't worried when the baby is too active, but they are worried when there's something very noticeably different, if that makes sense. And so,
Yeah.
which is the case here. But that's also why they encourage patients to do kick counts every night around the same time and write down, you know, what's normal for your baby. And then you can know if something's really like not normal, you know, and you can go in and get checked.
Yeah, that's great advice to establish a baseline for how your baby
Yeah.
behaves. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one I have is actually Rose, who I just talked about. And I'm just going to quote her directly because I love imagining this being in her voice. So she says, after traveling to a different continent, in all caps, and then she says, OMG, ha ha ha.
I'm doing the ha-ha for her.
There you go. To access everything. By the way, I'm like really insecure about my laugh lately because my oldest son was talking to me the other night and he was like, oh, I love daddy's laugh and I love my laugh. And I was like, me too. I love daddy's laugh and I love your laugh. And I was like, do you love my laugh? And he was like, I don't really know. So whatever.
I think you have a great laugh. I
always
love your
flattering.
laugh, Molly.
Oh, thank you.
I
Okay,
do
well,
love it.
I'll probably employ it another time. Not right now, since I'm thinking about it too
course.
much. So, okay. So she says, after traveling to a different continent to access everything my baby needed to survive, 16 hours of flying, her first ever flight, by the way, while like 26
yes.
weeks pregnant, to a new
It's
country.
crazy. And she'd never
She
left the
says-
country. She had never been out of Kenya before.
Oh my gosh. And then we were like, hey, send us a selfie of you on the plane. And she was like, absolutely not. That's so embarrassing. And we were like, do it anyway.
Yeah.
She obliged. She's the best.
Yeah.
Okay. She says, I was terribly tired and sleepy, and I couldn't wait to lay down and sleep the weekend off and then wake up to an appointment on Monday morning. And so this was a Friday night that she arrived, I think. So she says, but in order to have an unbothered weekend, my provider, which is Dr. Moise, and I agreed to have a welcome to a different continent MCA scan. You know, one of those.
I love it.
And I know.
gosh.
And it turned out that my baby was already hydropic. And
Oh my
she
gosh.
says, Dr. Moise and I said goodbye to the unbothered weekend, and we immediately prepared for an IUT, which ended up saving my now 1-year-old baby.
I still get like goosebumps all over my body when I think about how close it really came with her
know.
baby Lucas. It's still just unbelievable to me that we worked with Rose and she worked for months and months to try to get the visa, try to get some way to come over for the care from Dr. Moise. Finally made it, and it was down to like, a day or
Hours.
so.
Yeah. It was down
Yeah.
to hours. Yeah. It's incredible.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for that Friday night MCA scan and then that Saturday morning IUT. It's amazing.
I need to go back. Now I want to go re-listen to her episode again. I do that
Me
sometimes
too.
just to
Me
hear her
too.
voice.
I know. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, on that same note, actually, this next one is from Amanda, we interviewed a couple episodes ago, and then we'll wrap up her story at the end of this season. She had several tiny things, I would say, but she answered this question by saying, one tiny thing that saved Lenny's life was my doctor was willing to work on the weekend. Ultrasound Saturday, IUT Sunday. I don't think he would have made it without this. And I agree with her. I agree.
Because he was very, very low. He was very anemic at that IUT. That's amazing. Do you think, Molly, this is why we suggest, when possible, for patients to ask their MFM, hey, do you work on the weekends? Or what happens if my baby does need an IUT on the weekend?
Exactly. This is exactly why. For this scenario is, what if my baby looks sick on a Friday? Or what if it looks borderline on a Thursday and you need to rescan me on Saturday and do an
Right.
IUT on Sunday? That could
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Timing
glad
is
you brought
very
that up.
crucial.
Okay, the next one is a mom named Fritzy who has written into us about how much she loves the podcast. And she was, I think, the
love
first
it.
mom that we otherwise didn't know, I think, who wrote into us and said
Yeah.
how much she loved the podcast. And I
That was
still
so
remember her
encouraging.
note. Yes,
Yeah.
it makes our hearts so happy. So she said, I listened to my gut and to my MFM and stuck with weekly MCA scans, even though part of me really wanted to switch to bi-weekly scans mid-pregnancy. She said, my MFM showed concern when I asked her what she thought about switching to every other week. Silly me. All my son's MCA scans had been normal up until that point, and I was starting to get tired of going in weekly, dealing with the logistics of all the appointments. Totally get that. But we stuck with weekly, she said. And then at 25 weeks, my son's MOM score from his ultrasound all of a sudden came back at 1.9, and he was already hydropic. And
Wow.
she said it had been totally normal just 1 week before. And she had her first
That's
IUT the
amazing.
next day, which she believes saved his life. And I agree.
I'm getting like so nervous with these close calls. That is so crazy that in 1 week it bounced up that high, and then he was hydropic. Wow. And I'm so glad that her MFM was like, no, we're going to stick to this weekly plan of MCA scans.
Yes.
What a gift
Thank
that
you.
MFM
Thank you
was.
to the
Wow.
MFM.
By the way, just this
Yes.
is reminding me of my son August, and he also had very low MOMs, like, I mean, 1.0, 1.1. And at 25 weeks, it was very low again. Actually, 24 weeks was normal, very low. And then at 25 weeks, I came in and it was over 1.5, 6 days. And he needed an IUT like the next day. And I was
That's
like, this is
crazy.
so crazy because my other babies, it was like a gradual, like slowly rising, rising, rising. And then we weren't surprised when it got to 1.5. But for some reason, my last one was like, no, I'm going to trick you and look like I'm fine. And then 6 days later. So yeah,
Yeah.
Fritzy, thank you for sharing your story. I'm so glad. Your MFM was doing weekly scans.
What about, okay, I'm sure you have tiny things that saved your babies' lives. Do you want to share some of those?
Yes, sure. And it was hard to condense because, I feel like my whole care plan shifted and that's what really saved their lives. But if I kind of go all the way back and I look at like the impetus or the driving force behind that shift of care, what was it? What was the tiny thing that did that? So there were just a few small things I want to share. There's three. Number one, doing my own research on the internet. And I think that Googling it saved my babies' lives because that's where I learned about this disease. And it was other moms' stories that they shared online. And then that's how I got in touch with Dr. Moise, who eventually became my provider. And all of that shifted. And that's how my babies are alive. But if I had not done my own research and learned about this disease, I wouldn't have known what the monitoring and treatment should have looked like, and I wouldn't have known what to advocate for. And also I would have believed my first set of doctors who said, you can never have a living baby again. All of your babies will die before viability. So number two is the tiny thing is plasmapheresis and IVIG treatments. And that was truly the difference between life and death for my 3 surviving children. So my first sensitized pregnancy, my baby Lucy, didn't have those treatments. And she was severely anemic by 17 weeks. Her MOM was 2.5. Her hematocrit was 6. And those numbers tell us that she really probably needed an IUT at 15 weeks, if that's where she was by 17, And so then the 3 following babies, I did have plasmapheresis and IVIG treatments, and it delayed the need for that first IUT from 15 weeks with Lucy to 24 weeks, 28 weeks, and 25 weeks with the other 3. So you can see what a difference that makes if you're having a 25-week IUT as opposed to a 15-week IUT.
Yeah, which many doctors won't do even, or are prepared to do. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. Or they just don't have practice doing such an early IUT. So it was, that made a huge difference. And the last thing was changing doctors. That was it. That was incredibly important. Changing doctors, which for me meant I had to leave the state of Alabama, but that's okay. So sometimes you need a second opinion, and that can mean everything.
I love those. I don't know what I was expecting you to say, but it wasn't these for some reason, but they're so perfect because they really are. I don't know. I just, you think of more traditional things of like certain guidelines and monitoring, but these are the things that became the impetus for your children's survival.
Yeah.
It's so,
right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was thinking, I do have one to share that I think I shared in my story. You probably know what I'm referring to, but my one tiny thing that saved my child's life. Okay, let me get ready. Well, that
it's
with
a hard one. It's tough.
Yeah. That with my youngest son, Grayson, I always had issues with hemorrhaging during my pregnancies. And I had a really significant bleed with him when I was I guess it was 8 or 9 weeks maybe. And I was bleeding terribly, and the doctors did an ultrasound and said that his heart rate was too low and that he was going to pass in the next couple hours. And they suggested that I get a DNC to stop the bleeding because I was bleeding so much. And
Wow.
I'm so glad I said no because he's here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Molly. I'm so glad that you were brave. I'm so glad that you were courageous and you said no.
I think of it, and you know what's funny is Connor said after, I don't remember this, maybe I wasn't there or something, but he said after I said no, a nurse came up to him and was like, good decision. Like, I'm so glad you said no.
Wow.
So that was awesome.
Was Connor on board with that? Because if they're saying like, did they say like your life could be in jeopardy, you need to stop the bleeding, or you weren't to that point yet?
Well, since Connor's a doctor, he doesn't. Do you know how people say, like, if the doctor's in their family, they don't actually worry about their own people?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he was like,
you're fine.
They're like,
Everything's
yeah,
fine.
they're like literally mopping up a puddle of blood. And he's like, it's going to be okay.
Oh, my gosh, Molly. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. No, he was totally on board. He fully agreed. I'm sure he, even if
goodness.
I think even if I had agreed, he actually, I believe he would have said no. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. I love
Yeah.
it. And I love Gray. I'm so glad he's here. I remember how stressful that was, at least on
I
my
know.
end, just
I know.
seeing what was going to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, so the last prompt that we're going to talk about is, what is the best tiny thing that someone said to you that changed everything? I love this one because it shows what an impact other people can have on you in this really beautiful way. So yeah, what was something that changed your perspective totally or carried you through your experience? And I want to share one from Kate. And I think we mentioned her before, but she lost her daughter Josie, and she's actually currently pregnant and receiving wonderful care from Dr. Trevette. And I have just loved seeing her receive that care and grow, and her baby's doing amazing. So Kate says, here's the thing that someone said to her that changed everything. Don't grieve what's not yet lost. And oh my gosh, being pregnant after multiple losses and now facing high-risk pregnancy too is the most powerless I have ever felt. Facing the unknown every single day is terrifying, but this little quote helps bring me back to the moment. I have enough grieving to last a lifetime. I don't need to add the grief of hypothetical situations to my plate too. So don't grieve what's not yet lost.
Oh, I love that.
I love that.
And I love her sentiment of, you know, she has already endured so much grief, and she doesn't need to add grief of the future too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, imaginary grief of the future. Like it's probably not going to happen. And so, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. That was so good. I love that one. I have one. Let's see. Oh, the next one is from Fritzy, who we shared about earlier. And she said, oh, I love the nurse stories. We keep harping on the nurses. Awesome. She said, a nurse in my first pregnancy told me, remember, this is a season. And she says, this really resonated with me, and I think of it often, even today. It's a good reminder that your feelings and perspective around an experience will change as time passes without diminishing how hard the experience might be in that moment. But the perspective and the memory changes over time. Yeah. I love that.
I love that. And also when you're in it, knowing that this season will end and another one will start afterwards is so encouraging. That's amazing. Okay, so let me share another response from Jill as well. And you shared about her earlier, about her son, Madden. So she said the best thing that another mom said to me was to assign days to allow yourself to worry. If we had good scans on Monday, I would not worry on Tuesday and Wednesday. I would wait until the next day of scanning, which was Thursday. Same thing then. No worrying on Friday and Saturday, but Sunday I could start worrying about Monday's scan. That saved my mental health. I love that.
That's such a cool
so
tip.
good.
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like so much control, I feel like,
Yeah.
that you have over your emotions. That's
What's
amazing.
that like? No.
I don't know what that would be like.
No idea.
But I do remember, so you're on this cycle, you're on this emotional roller coaster weekly where your MCA scan is on this certain day, it's coming up, and then the closer you get, the more concerned you get, and then you see a good scan, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I can relax. And so then you relax. But then as the days progress, it starts increasing. So I love that she kind of quantified that to keep it within like healthy boundaries and said, okay, here's the day I'm going to let myself go crazy and worry, and then the next days I'm not allowed to worry. So
I love that. I love that. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Pro tip. That's a good one.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill.
I have one from Rose that I think this also may have been shared at our incredible episode with her, the end of last season. At the end of last season. She says, during my third allo-immunized pregnancy, so this is with her only living child, she says, which happens to be the only one which was successful, and having gone through trauma and uncertainty due to previous experiences of losses, we did not want to bother looking for any name for our baby, she says. In fact, I personally had no interest at all because I was afraid it would just end up like it always did, losing another baby. She says, but Dr. Moise told me to give the baby a name because he was going to survive. He even jokingly said that he wasn't going to do my next IUT without a name for the baby. And
I remember.
I love it. Yeah. Hearing that from someone who is giving it their all to help save my baby really was the best thing to hear after an experience of no access to such care and monitoring for HDFN in my country.
Wow. Dr. Moise with the win again. That's amazing. Like, what a great insight for him to share. And also for him to be aware of that trauma that she's experienced and just think about his patient as more than, let's save this baby. He's thinking about the whole patient and what does she need, you know?
Yeah, for him to be so in tune with that and aware that that was something that she was coping with and walking her through that with the confidence of saying, I know I'm going to protect your baby, you know?
Okay, here's another one. And this is from Katie, who works with us here at Aloe Hope. And we also shared her story in season 2 of the podcast. And then she's going to be joining us a little bit later in this season for a few episodes. She remembers the faith her labor and delivery nurse had during her severely affected pregnancy with her son, Liam. Her nurse's name is Paula, and she said, "This will be your little man someday." Oh my gosh. He is going to be in your arms. He is waiting to be held by you. Wow. She never wavered in her belief that he would survive. Insights from that nurse really helped Katie feel more trusting about the future with her son. I love that so much.
Oh, thank you, Paula. How wonderful.
Yes, these nurses are amazing.
Yes, wow. I know. Okay, I have a short one, but so good for so many situations. This one is from Megan in the U.S.
Okay.
And hers is simply, you are stronger than you know. How true is that? I feel like I feel so lucky because I think we see women living out that truth every day. And it always amazes me. It's incredible what people can rise to. They are stronger than they know, even if they don't want to have to be that strong sometimes, you know?
Right. Yeah. I am inspired by the women in our community on a daily basis. Truly, truly inspired. Okay. So I have one tiny thing quickly to share that someone said to me.
Only if it's tiny.
Changed everything.
Tiny only.
I'm going to try. Okay. Actually, she just said it was very tiny. And so it was when I was pregnant with my second daughter. So my first daughter died midway through my pregnancy from HDFN. And then I went back to the same team, hoping that there would be, updated protocols and more proactive care. And there wasn't, unfortunately. And so here I am, pregnant again at the same hospital. They're trying to do basically the same protocols, same type of care. And I felt like we were heading towards the same outcome. Yeah. And I was really nervous. And I remember I was in an ultrasound. I was having an MCA scan, and I was talking during that with my MFM and saying, I'm thinking about going to Houston and maybe having Dr. Moise care for me there and to give my daughter the best shot at life. And they were like, it's not necessary. It's fine. You can stay here. There's no need to be traveling to another doctor or another state. And so I was torn. I was like, what do? I don't know what to do. So my MFM said, go and wait for me in my office, and then I'll come in there when I have a moment and we can discuss everything. So I went and sat in his office. The door was open and he wasn't in there yet, but I was just like stressing out and praying and asking God, like, what do I do that's best for my baby? What do I do? Mm-hmm. And so suddenly one of the nurses, we're back to the nurse. She had been in my ultrasound. She had been in there with me. And of course had been silent during all of that, but she came in really quick. She snuck in and said really quietly, if I were you, I would already be in Houston.
Oh,
and
my
then she
gosh.
ran off. That's it. If I were you, I would already be in Houston. And that one thing changed everything for me and my family. And I had the courage to not only change doctors, but move out of state to Texas. A few days later, we were driving to Texas.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. I love that so much.
I know. So I don't even know what her name was. I don't know who she was.
We have to find her.
Maybe she'll hear this, but
yeah,
Dr. Moise saved my babies. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That was a great, well, I would love to end on that, but I also have one more thing to add.
Please do. Yours is going to be just as good. I know it.
Okay. Well, I want to share one tiny thing that someone said to me once that I still tell myself now. And I feel like everyone would really benefit from this. And it was, me and you were very close. And I don't know, why I was going through something. I don't even know what it was. And you said to me with such clarity, you said, you are safe, you are loved, you are doing a good job.
Oh my gosh.
And I
forgot that this is what it was going to be.
And it just filled my heart. And I think about it all the time.
Oh, Molly, that's so sweet. I remember telling you that because at the time I had just had my baby August, my last baby, and I was really struggling with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety and postpartum OCD, and I was overwhelmed. And I remember at night I couldn't sleep. I was so stressed out, but I would repeat that to myself. I am safe. I am loved. I'm doing a good job over and over and over again. And that would help me fall asleep. And so I love that it encouraged you as well.
Yeah, it really
amazing.
Did. And hopefully other people who listen to this too can tell themselves those things, whether they're currently pregnant or whoever they are. So that is, I think, the perfect way to end.
Oh, I feel honored. I love you. Thank you.
I love
You're
you too.
amazing.
So what do we do now? Oh my gosh. And our producers were like, keep the mood elevated. Okay. Oh, we started off. It's okay. It's
well,
big
they did
feels.
use the word intense. I feel like we kept
This
it
is
intense.
This is like we're having. This
all
is
over
what
the
I
place.
say when I tell my kids. Like you're having feels. We're just having feels. Sometimes they're good feels.
Yeah.
Just large feels. So
I mean, they're just love.
yeah,
Just love feels.
that's all it is.
That's a good place to end.
I think so too.
Feeling loved and loving. Okay.
I think so too. Whether you are a patient, provider, or otherwise affected by antibodies in pregnancy, we are here for you. We have great resources on our website at allohopefoundation.org. That's allo, spelled A-L-L-O, hopefoundation.org.
Thanks for listening. And it kept Katie feeling more, sorry, and it kept Katie, wait.
That was me. I typed the word wrong.
No, I
Feeling.
got it.
Feeling? Feel.
I got, no,
Feel.
I'm saying
Oh, it
kept
worked.
instead of helped. It's me. I'm the problem.
Okay.
It's me. It helped